Welcome to Bottle Rocket with Elena Sucheva, your top hockey podcast. Welcome back to Bottle Rocket. I'm Elena, joined as always by Maeve and Teabag. Today our guest is Joe Dionisio, hockey director in Santa Barbara's Ice in Paradise, an award-winning screenwriter, and a veteran NHL journalist. Joe, pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
His nickname is Jolton. Joe. We won't go into that. I want to ask him the first question because part of Joe's professional life involved covering hockey in Florida. And after the outdoor game between the Rangers and Panthers, which sold out the joint, I want Joe to tell us what it was like way back when and how he was there. He was the only guy who was there when the NHL owners accepted the Panthers into the league. So I give you that, Joe.
These were dark days, both literally and figuratively, down in Florida in the early days. Very few people knew about hockey or even cared about it at that point. So just jumping ahead, seeing last night's outdoor game just blew my mind because I was there for the dark days. And I mean, I had a lot of fun, but there was also a lot of unpleasantness. There's a lot of I'd say, anti-North sentiment, and all that's changed, thankfully. But yet, I like to refer to it that I was in the delivery room at the birth of the Panthers and the Ducks. And as the story goes, the NHL Board of Governors is not stupid. When they host their meetings, they always go to a country club or so on. So the Breakers Hotel is one of the most upscale hotels in the country, and that's where they held their meetings. So they can go play golf on their off days. So I was begging my editor. I was a sports writer with the Palm Beach Post, and I begged my editor to let me go, and they didn't want to send me. And back, I was literally like a mile from our newspaper office. So twisted my editor's arm, and I went to the event, and there was virtually nobody there. There was a couple of Canadian media, but in terms of Americans, it was just a ghost town. And I went for the free buffet, essentially. There's great food there. And this is probably about a mile from Mar-a-Lago, just to give you a little reference of where that is. So I go into the room, and Stan, you'll appreciate this. This was the nether area between commissioners. So you had John Ziegler for forever, and we've had Gary Denton forever. There was a brief time when there was someone who sort of voted themselves into the Hall of Fame. That was Gil Stein. And I believe it was during his tenure. And so those are the people in the room, and it was very quiet and dead. And my background is in the arts. I studied film history, school, so on. So the first person I see walk through the door is the CEO of Disney. And I was baffled. Why is the CEO of Disney here? It made no sense. And walking 10 feet behind it was Wayne Huizenga. Also baffled. This is the president or the owner of the Miami Dolphins NFL team, and as well, Blockbuster Video and so on. And I couldn't figure out why are these two guys here. And then they said, we're announcing 2 NHL franchises, which there was no rumor of this. There really was not. There had been an NHL exhibition game in Miami between the Rangers and I believe the Lightning. But and there was a move to do it, but there was still no rumors. And now they just announced the team. And the funny part was myself and a couple other reporters asked the Disney guy, so what's the name of your team? And he said, oh, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. And everybody laughed. They thought he was joking. And you got to go back in time. There's a children's movie that comes out. There was no concept that Anaheim was going to have an NHL franchise. And he said, I'm not joking. And the couple of Canadian media guys were appalled. Like, sacrilege, this is our game. And then there was no name for the for the Florida franchise yet. So I beat everyone to the punch with this story. I had it more than anyone else. And I remember my bosses at the Palm Beach Post were very upset because I was a Cub reporter. I was nobody. I was all the way down. I mean, on the weekends, I was doing agate. Stan will know what agate is. And Elena, you're too young. You won't know what agate is. But there used to be in newspapers massive pages of statistics. Myself had a combined. So I was at the bottom rung of the journalism ladder. And now I have the headline. This isn't even going to the sports section. This is the front page of the entire Palm Beach Post. And, that was the birth of 2 NHL franchises.
Joe, you and Stan famously met at the joining urinals at the New York State throwaway rest stop, right? That's not a sentence we say every day. How did this happen?
That is not a sentence I say every day. And also, it's one of the moments of my life where lived near Baseball Hall of Fame, and Cooper dropped her off because we had spent time together. And we had been up. I was exhausted. So I'm driving home. It's a hot August morning, and I'm falling asleep at the wheel. I pull into a rest area, and I fall asleep in my car for a good 2-3 hours. I wake up hot and sweaty. By this time, it's probably like 9, 8. And I see a guy walk, and I'm like, geez. I said, that's Stan Fischler. I mean, I'm a hockey addict at this point. This isn't a new. So he comes over, washes his hands. I said, aren't you Stan Fischler? Keep in mind the circumstances here. We're in a men's room, two guys together. It was an unusual way to introduce yourself to somebody. And in Stan's classic blunt New York way. And I said, I got my degree from Syracuse in journalism, and I want to be a hockey writer. Really? Follow me. We walk out of the men's room, and we're in the lobby of the restaurant. And at this point, I think Stan's by himself. I have no reason to know otherwise. And then a woman walks out of the ladies' room. And I knew Stan's work so well that I knew his wife's name as well. So before he could introduce us, I said, hi, Shirley, how are you? So at this point, Stan must think I'm a stalker because I know his family's name. I know everything. And then Shirley, also in her blunt New York way, she said, who's this guy? And then Stan replied, his name's Joe. I met him in the shitter. And the punchline is that the next morning, the very next morning, I was writing a book with Stan.
That's hilarious. During the bubble year, the COVID year, when the playoffs were played in Edmonton and Toronto, I think it was. One of the players was asked, "How are you going to adjust playing in front of empty stadiums?" And he said, well, I played in Florida, so I'm used to it. And I'm just wondering, was it that bad? Like, was it? Whenever I watch Florida on TV, I guess they only show the lower bowl, and it always looks full to me. So, Joe,
it was slow from all ends, really. Yeah, ticket sales were slow at first, and the only people going were the snowbirds, as they would call them. The former transplanted New Yorkers who lived down there. So that was a good course. You had something to build on. But that's only half your audience. You really have to get native Floridians. And, priority-wise, if you did a depth chart, the NHL after baseball, football, basketball, tennis, golf, NASCAR, I mean, it was down. The story I always like to tell in terms of popularity is I got in trouble with my sports editor one day because it was the Stanley Cup final that week. And I put some Stanley Cup final news in my section of the sports section. And he was livid. And he said, who worked? He had a very Southern accent. Who was working yesterday? Was that Joe D? And of course, it was me. And he was that I had not put a girls' high school volleyball match on the page instead of the NHL Stanley Cup final. So that kind of tells you where, some of the battles you were fighting. So it wasn't just attendance; it was also just a knowledge base of, I felt like I understand that I always wanted to be a good ambassador for the sport. And that was part of it. I felt like I was educating everyone, not just my colleagues, but the fans. I remember I was telling the organist what to play. An organist has never worked. Stan just did a great organist story for the Hockey News. The organist doesn't know what to play. So I was telling him, I said, there's a holding penalty. I said, you could play Smokey Robinson. You really got a hold on me, and so on. So I felt it was educating. Even sports writers, we think might know better. Florida didn't know anything. We literally had one of our sports writers say that icing was a penalty. I had to explain to them icing is not a penalty; it's just a whistle. So there were a lot of problems, but they've come a long way. I was thinking, especially at the recreational level, which is where the ticket sales come from, when you have players. And that was the smartest thing the Panthers did. They invested in a lot of like roller hockey and so on. And once you had players playing, that's a good way to get families to go to the arena. When I started, I was living in Fort Lauderdale, because I lived all over. I was like a gypsy. I lived all over Florida. And when I was living in Fort Lauderdale, there was a roller hockey league that was played on a tennis court, which meant when the ball went, when it had a bounce, you had an inbound. It was this most cockamamie thing you've ever heard in your life. And they built 2 roller rinks after that, thinking it would take off. And then eventually homeless people were just living in them. They weren't even using it until the Panthers sort of invested to get it going. And now that same place, that's where the Panthers' new practice facility is. The Iceplex, I believe it's called, in Holiday Park in Fort Lauderdale. But it was a graveyard when I started playing roller hockey outdoor on a basketball court, and now it's a real fancy practice facility.
Joe, when you took the job at the Ice in Paradise in Santa Barbara, you had to learn how to drive a Zamboni. How hard was it to learn, and how fun is it to drive it?
Elena, that's a great question. This is the analogy I like to give. When I ask people, do you know how to drive a stick shift? And some people can, some people can't. And the stick shift, they can't drive because there's one extra thing, which is the clutch. You drive a Zamboni, there were about 13 different levers that you were simultaneously working for augers and water and wash water and blade height. And the genius who invented them, I say sarcastically, he didn't put those levers in front of you like a car. He put them behind you, or at least at your side. So while you're driving forward, you need to be looking backwards to be doing all this kind of shenanigans. So it is a very hard thing to learn, and I have a lot of experience at this point, and I've trained a lot of people. And but the joke I was making, a story for Stan for the Hockey News on learning to drive a Zamboni in Santa Barbara. The ice was so bad, it was like a so now the ice is much better, and but it's a very much a craft, and people are it takes a lot of years and a lot of reps. Once you do it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, you learn the art of it. And we have lots of good Zamboni drivers at the rink now. So luckily I'm not I used to be virtually the only one. It was me and 2 other people at some point. And now we have a lot more people working the ice, thankfully.
I want to make a comment about going into the hockey in Florida. When I was doing the Devils games, Tampa Bay Lightning had come into the league. This is when John Tortorella was coaching, and they got real good. As we know, they won. Tortorella won a Stanley Cup. But I remember we covered a morning skate, and after the skate was done, the ice was, the Zamboni the ice. And the next thing we know, after we had interviewed all the players, we were about to leave, and I walk out to the rink, and I saw these kids playing a game. And these are Floridian kids, and I couldn't believe how good they were. I mean, these kids could have been playing in North Dakota or Minnesota. They were just terrific. And of course, what's happened is that now guys in the NHL are from Chikrin, who's now with Washington, one of their best defensemen. He came out of it. It's interesting because when my son Simon got his heart transplant in 1993, one of the nurses at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in Manhattan, she was going with a guy who was a Floridian. And we got friendly, and this guy became he had his own fishing boat that he would take people out, go fishing. And I was talking to him one day, and he said, there's a kid here whose father played in the NHL, which was Chikrin. And he said, keep your eye on this kid because he's going to be really good. And of course, he became now a veteran in the NHL. So what we were seeing is now guys are coming out of Arizona going to the NHL. The guy on Toronto, what's his name? Matthews?
Yeah, Austin Matthews and Matthew Nice.
So this whole thing is, now kids are coming out of places like you never would have believed back then. Of course, I go way, way back. Nobody would have believed the kid from the New York area would make it to the NHL. And of course, one reason why the Rangers won the game in Miami was because of the quarterback, Adam Fox. A Long Island kid makes it to the NHL. And of course, that's nothing new now. A lot of kids are coming out of the New York area. So it's tremendous, tremendous changes. Anybody come out from Vancouver anymore?
Macklin Celebrini, he's a local kid. Connor Bedard. We're a hockey manufacturer here. Joe, I want to ask you. I'm in the Vancouver area, Vancouver, Canada, and this is my Roberto Luongo jersey. I'm a huge Roberto Luongo fan. So I want to ask you, in his playing days, when he was playing his first run and his second run, how popular a player was he for the Panthers?
I think you know this as well. He's been popular wherever he's been. He's just a guy everyone always liked. If I had known you were such a Canucks fan, I would have worn my Pavel Bure jersey for you. But in any case, but yeah, Luongo is always a popular figure. He has that personality, and I think you can see that's why the organization has kept him on. He's a great ambassador. Stan, he reminds me of a little bit. It's sort of like Bobby Nystrom in terms of it's just a homegrown kind of guy that really fit into the franchise, and it's the kind of person that the Panthers owners would want to keep around because he does have that really good reputation. He's very personable. I mean, the fact that he was the only captain as a goalie in recent years. I mean, that's unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that didn't work out too well because he didn't want to throw anybody under the bus, so he couldn't be critical of anybody. So because they're the ones blocking shots for him, so he always had to hold back. So that didn't work out very well. But when we traded Pavel Bure to get Roberto Luongo. What was the reaction in Florida? Because we
That
also
was
got
exactly that was just around the time.
Jovanovski.
Yes, I was there for. I remember meeting Jovanovski's parents on draft day, and that was a pretty good coup because he was highly touted. Jovo Cop was, and I think there was a lot of talk at the time. Do you recall who went second that year? I think was it Radek Bonk?
I think yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember there's a lot of talk of who the Panthers are going to take. I mean, when you acquire that first round pick and so on, you don't want to screw it up. And the great thing going back to Islanders is that Bill Torrey was a defense, and there were a lot of people clamoring for the Panthers to take Radek Bonk. He was flashy, he had a weird name.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to bonk him over the head, and and Bill Torrey was not a guy to cave into the whims of fans. He was, that was the greatness of Torrey. He stood by his principles to the very end, and it was a great pick. Bonk had an okay career, but Jovanovski was an impact player for quite a while and went on. He had a very good career, obviously. But yeah, that was, they did it well, all things considered, with that trade.
Well, you're a native Long Islander. How do you place the dynasty team in terms of the greatest NHL teams of all time?
You can say I'm biased. I think they're right there. You look at it statistically, the 19 playoff series consecutive.
Right.
I don't see how anyone ever beats that. And with all due respect to the other dynasties, the Canadians of the 70s and so on, those are different leagues, or even the, Canadians of the 50s. Fantastic team, obviously one of the greatest. But I don't know how you can compare winning consecutive titles in a 16 league compared to a 21 team league. Just statistically, there's no comparison. 6 versus 21, there's no. So that's why I would say if the Panthers win another one in a 32 team league, you've got to think that that's going to put them. I mean, they're still not to the Islanders level yet, but I think the Islanders are right there. And the great thing about that Islanders team, going back to Bill Torrey again, is it was Torrey who sort of innovated what Brian Burke later went on to champion, which was the idea of your team to win a cup was going to probably face 2 or 3 different style opponents. And if your team can't win in all 3 styles, might have been speed, it might have been toughness and fisticuffs, or it might have been scoring. And the Islanders were more than happy. Whatever you wanted to do, they were probably going to embarrass you. And Jerry, don't take this the wrong way, but when I watch that 82 final, I watch reruns of it, it's men against boys. Yeah. And that was a good Vancouver team. Was that Tony Tanti, and they go right down the line. They had good players. They had a good goal. That was not a weak team by any stretch. And you watch that 1982 final in hindsight now, the Islanders were toying with them. It was not even, they were running on all cylinders. So Stan, to answer your question, I don't see anyone statistically that really matches up to what the Islanders achieved.
Well, to back up your point, to get to the Cup, there were at least 2 series, maybe a third, where they had to play the Rangers. And anytime they had to play the Rangers, that was really extra tough because of the rivalry. And in one of the series went 6 games, I remember. And in the other one, when the Islanders swept them. Plus, you go to 1984, when they again played the Rangers, which was considered one of the greatest series of all time. That was when it went to a deciding game and went into overtime. Kenny Morrow got the winning goal. That was as tough as anything, and of course that was leading into the 19th straight series win. And I've said this many times. You can take the Gretzky years; they never won 3 in a row, but I revere. I separate them by decades. I revere the years when the guys didn't wear helmets, and the Canadiens team, starting with the win in '56 through 1960, when you had so many Hall of Famers. You had the Rocket, you had the Pocket Rocket, you had Dickie Moore, you had Doug Harvey, you had Jacques Plante. I mean, you had Boom Boom, you had Beliveau. In terms of Hall of Famers and a fantastic run, and then also an amazing coach in Toe Blake. And Toe Blake was a rookie coach when they when they won that first cup. So you have to divide them by eras. I'm convinced, believe it or not, based on the game in Miami, a Ranger game with the Panthers. I'm convinced the Panthers are not going to make the playoffs. I think that they are now in the middle of attrition. They got too many guys out, and their goalie is too old. He's 37 years old. I think they're going to get beat out, and I think the Rangers win is going to catapult them. We'll see what happens, but I see this as a big boost for the Rangers, a big downer for the Panthers. We'll talk about it sometime at the end of March and see, or beginning of April, see what happens. But I love the Panthers. I love them. One of my favorite teams, but I just don't like what I'm seeing. Too many injuries, right at the beginning of the season. Crazy injuries. We'll see.
Stan, I watched the game last night, and if you saw, they had former Florida Marlin baseball star Jeff Conine was interviewed at one of the things. And I remember him coming to my roller hockey games at this hole-in-the-wall indoor arena in Green Acres, Florida. And Jeff Conine would come to the games and so on. And I just remember thinking of, wow, well, why is a professional baseball player coming to this like low-rent roller hockey game? But a genuine hockey fan, and it was just funny to see how much transition there's been. Because, in fact, Stan, I don't think I ever told you this. There was also an NHL alumni game held in Florida well before the Panthers were born. And there was a team, just a recreational team in Singer Island, which is sort of North Palm Beach. And they were going to play a charity game against a team of NHL alumni. So I was all excited. I was going to cover this for the newspaper. And the night before the game, I get a phone call from the organizer of the tournament, and he knew I was going to cover it. He said, "We have a bit of a problem." He said, 2 of the NHL alumni bowed out, and the NHL alumni is short players. And I think the 2, if I remember correctly, I think it was Phil Esposito and Bobby Clark were going to play in the game. And, and the team included Brian Soupy Campbell, Jill Malash, Roberto Romano. Stan, do you remember Rosie Paymont?
Very well. He had a kind of a restaurant down in Florida before anybody thought about it.
That's right. That's exactly why I mentioned it. Rosie Paymont had this seedy sports bar on Federal Highway in Fort Lauderdale. It's called the Penalty Box. And I used to go there because it was one place I could go and watch hockey and so on. So Paymont was one of the players and so on. So I get this phone call that they're short, and they said, "Hey, can you play?" I am the only person in maybe history to play in an NHL alumni game who never played a game at NHL. And we played. And so I just got one of my colleagues at the Palm Beach Post to cover the game. And that was kind of satisfying because he had to cover me, a guy who probably didn't give a damn about hockey. He had to cover me, and then I think I scored twice, and that made me happy too, because then he had to write my name. If I had not scored, he could have left my name out of the story. So that gave me a little bit of satisfaction of playing that. And the downside is this is the pre-smartphone era. Like what I wouldn't give to have video of me playing in an NHL alumni game.
You got to tell us whether you played defense or forward, and who was on your line, who was your partner, and how good were you?
It was, well, I was good enough that someone passed it to me. But yeah, it was Brian Soupy Campbell I was skating with, and I don't remember who the other winger was. It wasn't Paymonsk. I think he was on the other line. So that was, but Stan, you're raising a good point. I had much better line mates thanks to you. I worked camp in the Catskills, if you remember, famously up at the Concord, and there was a hockey camp going on, and I got to skate with Luc Robitaille and against Mario Lemieux. So Stan, I owe my entire career to you, and every person I've ever met and so on is kind of to you. But that photograph I have with me and Mario is just priceless. That's like it's my firstborn child, that photograph. What I remember most was I was going to try really hard. I'm not in the same league as Luc Robitaille or Mario. And I remember going to the corner against Mario and foolishly thinking maybe I could take the puck from him. So we both go into the corner at the same time. And he kind of let me get there first. And I, for a second, had the puck on my stick. And then all of a sudden, he came from behind me. And it was like a solar eclipse. It got really dark because he just enveloped me and pinned me completely until he removed me from the puck and went away with it and did whatever he wanted, as you would expect Mario to do. And then that's when I appreciated sort of the size and the power of Mario Lemieux, because he was skilled, but he was a big dude. And the notion that I thought I could maybe take the puck for him if I worked really was proven otherwise.
Naive would be the word I would use.
Stupid. Yeah.
Well, it's really good to talk to a hockey writer who actually played the game. Not because there are quite a few who never put on a pair of skates, and so if you've played the game, you've got a different perspective of it. Because you're in the action, so you can picture when you're covering NHL, you can picture, yourself in the moment. So it's how much hockey did you play growing up, and what level did you make it to?
I was addicted to the sport from the first time. In fact, if you ever seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss, he's kind of obsessed with this alien mountain that's forming, and he's making mashed potato mountains to simulate where the alien things are. I was doing that in woodshop, making pucks like a psychopath, because I was fascinated. What is this puck? It wasn't a ball. I couldn't get over it. And I remember the shop teacher thinking, what's wrong with this idiot Joe? Maybe he's got some mental deficiency, because all he does is make pucks. And I still have I swear to you, I still have those pucks somewhere. I guarantee you I still have them. I never throw away a puck.
How many did you make?
I have a closet full of wood pucks, which are of no use to anyone, but so anyway, so I started at a young age, and I was playing street hockey in my neighborhood with my friends, and eventually graduated. Me and my hoodlum buddies were playing road hockey in supermarket parking lots, and in this kind of low town where I grew up, Island, roller hockey was pretty big. And there were actually unofficial leagues that took place in supermarket parking lots. And what you would do is you would shopping carts. I don't know if they do this in Canada. I don't know. I know they have road hockey. You take 3 shopping carts, put them, and it almost matched perfectly a 4x6 hockey net. 3 shopping carts were perfect measurements. And you would shoot into the shopping cart, which is, placed on its side. And God, we terrorized those poor supermarket, little old ladies coming out with bags of groceries, and hockey balls are whizzing by their heads and so on. But because I had mostly been a roller hockey player, I was drafted, if you recall, in the early 90s when there was the rollerblade craze. They launched a professional roller hockey league, Roller Hockey International, which aired on ESPN. And I was drafted by the Florida Hammerheads, which was a coincidence because I ended up moving to Florida. And so that's if you want to know what the highest level, Jerry, that I played, that was it. It was playing a little bit of college club and then playing on the taxi squad for an RHI team. And that was amusing for a lot of different reasons. Roller hockey is, I never anticipated it would last on ESPN, but for a brief while there, it was kind of in vogue before it died like the dodo bird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had the Vancouver Voodoo. Tiger Williams owned and coached the team, and my buddy Ken Kinney was the goalie, and so it was.
Jerry, I have a gift for you. Hold on.
No way!
Vancouver Voodoo jersey.
No way! Oh my God, that is. Oh, look at that! Holy cow!
Joe, you got to tell us, Joe. Please, T-Bag knows what it is. What is it? What was it?
That's the Vancouver Voodoo jersey.
That was the Vancouver franchise. Yes.
For Roller Hockey International. So, yeah. That's crazy. How did you get that jersey?
I collect jerseys. I have in my storage unit back in New York, I have about 100 jerseys.
Wow.
And so my apartment here in Santa Barbara, California is too small for them. But every time I go back to New York, I come back here, I bring 1 or 2. And the problem is my apartment is now running out of space because I have way too many. In fact, if I can try this here. Let's see.
Wow, look at that.
Of all the jerseys that you possess, which do you consider your all-time favorite?
No question. Sidney Crosby's junior team, the Rimouski Oceanic, is one of my favorite jerseys. I absolutely love it. And I have home and away. But not with Sidney Crosby's number. No offense to Sid. I'm sorry, I just dropped my mic. My apologies. But yes, that's my favorite jersey, the Rimouski Oceanic.
Joe, I want to talk a bit more about the Florida Panthers. I watched the Winter Classic yesterday, and Jerry and I were talking about the way they arrived. Barkov, Marchand, the flashy cars, the cigars, even bringing the Stanley Cup. Do you think that kind of presentation is part of why the Panthers rub some fans the wrong way? That whole "we've arrived" energy, does it fuel the dislike from other teams and fan bases, or is that just the price of winning?
Listen, I think anytime you are the championship, there's going to be a target on your back. People are going to find a way to dislike you. They're jealous. I'm with Stan. I love this Panther team. I love how they're built. I know it rubs people the wrong way. And I will admit that in the early years, I wasn't a big Brad Marchand fan, when he was licking pieces and so on. But boy, I have grown to love him. He is just a phenomenal player. And, I think some of his antics obscure how good he is. I mean, he's just got remarkable hands. He performs in the clutch. So I'm with Stan. I like this team a lot. I think, they have a lot going for them. Obviously injuries, but Stan, I don't know if I agree with you. I think if Kachuk can come back soon,
He's coming back.
maybe they can right the ship.
I hope so.
He's close.
I hope so because, I have to add something about Marshawn. I have a guy, actually two guys who watch Ranger games for me and offer comments, and I use it in, the day after. And this guy wrote something where he was talking about Marshawn. I forget who the other guy, and he referred to him as a thug. And I wrote back to him. I don't even want to tell what I said to him, but Marshawn is cut from a mold of guys I remember back to the Maple Leafs when they won the 3 straight cups in the late 40s. Bill Ezenicki and Howie Mika played that kind of hockey. Tony Leswick, as a Ranger, they used to call him Tough Tony. Leswick goes to Detroit. He scores a cup-winning goal for the Red Wings. And Marshawn is in that class, just like you said. He's a good, talented hockey player who plays the game the way any other team would like to have this guy. And the people who don't like the Panthers, there's one word for them, and that's they're jealous. They're jealous of this team.
Well, I'm a bitter Leafs fan. But I actually really like Marchand. I met him in Miami last year, got his autograph on my Team Canada jersey. And honestly, he was great. Super charming and really witty. And I'm genuinely happy for him to be still playing at this level, at this age. That's pretty impressive. That said, I'm kind of with Stan on this one. I just don't see them winning the cup. And with all the attrition they're dealing with, I'm not even totally convinced they make the playoffs. What do you think, Joe?
I think it's going to be right down to the wire. There's going to be, a bounce here or there may decide who gets in. But everyone's talking. This is parity like we've never seen before, or mediocrity, if you want to call it by a different word. There's a lot of teams hovering around, and I'll tell you the team that has been playing well that I don't have faith in is Detroit. Detroit, they put together some, I think, and they got a little more wins, obviously. But it's not a team I'm sold on. I don't look at that roster. I'm not impressed by what they have. So if you're looking at who might fall out of good graces, that might be, one possibility. But yeah, it's going to be tight. It's just, you're going to need bounces to go the right way, and that goes for everyone. For anyone else, even the Island. All these teams are in a very tight mix, so it's going to be a lot of, the hockey gods will be watching. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's a lot will depend on injuries, and you're talking about Florida. We're talking all about the Panthers. We got to acknowledge that the Lightning have a wonderful team, and the two Florida teams have two of the best coaches in hockey. I mean, John Cooper, great guy, smart guy, funny guy, and of course Paul Maurice, same thing, and Tampa, people thought Tampa would fade away. They're not fading away. They're right. They're right up there. Could be, and they got a goalie who's younger than Bob is, and Vasilevsky's right in there. And the thing is, you got the goaltending like the Rangers have. You got a shot if the rest of the team can play decent, and certainly Tampa Bay's got that. They've got a nice mix and a great coach.
Joe, you've interviewed a lot of NHL personalities. Who were some of your favorite interviews? And on the flip side, were there any that were, let's say, less pleasant? You can name names.
I will name names. I'm not going to get fired for this. I will name names. First of all, as a whole, Stan can attest to this. Hockey players are fantastic for the most part. They really are the best to deal with. The ones that I have fond memories of, guys like Joe Ricci and Hubie McDonough, old Islanders. We're all, a treat to deal with. But in terms of, I had the greatest time with Gordie Howe. I was just blown away. I never had any player made me feel as at home as Gordie Howe did. Gordie came to Florida to just, he was a spectator at one of the there was a minor league team in West Palm Beach called the West Palm Beach Blaze. And they were coached by Bill Nyrop, who was a former Montreal Canadian during their 76 to 1980 dynasty. You're good. And you got to go back then. It was unheard of for an American to have a real good roster, a definitive roster spot on Montreal Canadiens team. Listen, Montreal is provincial now. You can imagine they trade for players because they have French last names. You can't imagine how provincial they were back in the 70s. So Bill Nyrop, who really knew hockey, being part of the Habs system, he was the coach. And so the team was pretty popular. And so Gordie Howe decided he was going to attend one of the West Palm Beach Blaze games. So now I was working that night at the Palm Beach Post, and I had a very strange habit, which was the West Palm Beach Auditorium was probably about, I don't know, maybe 3-4 miles from the newspaper office. And my bosses would not let me go cover the games all the time when I wanted to. So I would just use my own lunch hour, and I would race there at like 95 miles an hour. I hope the police aren't watching this. I would race there at 95 miles an hour, run straight through security. They would let me in, and I'd do my interviews. I'd watch a little bit of the game, and then I'd run back to the office. And in fact, sometimes my newspaper editor would be like, "How did you put this into the story? How would you know?" I didn't want to tell him I was at the game. He thought I was around the corner having lunch in the cafeteria. So at one of these games, Gordie was there, and I sat with Gordie. I watched the entire intermission with him. We talked the entire time, and he made me feel like I was his teammate. And I think a lot of people, I'm not the only person to say this. He just really was just a real great guy, and he was terrific. And then the first person I ever spoke to, there weren't a lot of bad hockey guys, so I can't say that. The one who was really standoffish that I recall was Igor. And I don't know why. I don't know if maybe I just caught him on big night because he's respected. But Igor Larionov was effusive, let's put it that way. But the worst human by far. I also got to cover spring training baseball. And the New York Mets trained in Port St. Lucie, which is in our readership area, the West Palm Beach Post. And I went to go interview, I guess it was Bobby Bonilla, famously not a great guy. And I wasn't the regular baseball guy. I was just filling in. And I went up to Bonilla, and I swear to you, I asked him a softball question. It was to it. Then I was like, "Oh, how great a teammate is Eddie Murray was on the team, who's great hitter, famous for hitting grand slam home runs." I said, "Oh, what is it that made you so good in the clutch?" And Bobby Bonilla was so nasty to me, I just almost lost it. And I remember I was upset with myself because just before that, there was a columnist for the New York Post, Steve Serby, who had gotten into a fist fight with, and I can't remember who it was, with a baseball player. And this is sort of the era where like this might happen, and in hindsight, I was thinking I should have told Bobby Bonilla to drop dead just so he could punch me in the face, because he is still earning. His contract hasn't expired. He signed the worst contract in history, and he's still earning. I think it's a Met holiday. It's Bobby Bonilla Day. and he's still getting $5 million a year. What the hell he's getting? He retired probably 20 years ago, and he's still getting paid. And I would be getting if I would have taken a shot at him, but I failed to do that.
Yeah. I think it's July 1st every year. It's Bobby Bonilla Day. They have to pay Bobby Bonilla's contract. The Islanders almost matched him with Alexei Yashin. they had to pay him for years after his contract expired. So, yeah.
That's right.
So how many sports do you cover for this paper?
I covered everything: baseball, tennis, golf, hockey. I remember at one point, again, I was at the bottom rung of the ladder, so you're going to do whatever they tell you to do. And the worst I remember is I had to do the fishing report one day. What do I know about fish? The only thing I know about fish is the fillet of fish at McDonald's. That's the extent of my knowledge of seafood. And I was the world's worst fishing reporter. And so everything I did was fishy other than covering hockey.
Well, I'll tell you a story. I played hockey with 3 or 4 guys, and they would sit for hours and talk fishing. I was like, I don't know how you can do that. Like, how can you talk so long about fishing? Like, it's just, but they would talk about lures and the strength of their the reels and everything. Oh my God, it was terrible. But yeah, so there's a lot of minutia when it comes to fishing.
Yeah. But Joe, we have to ask this question because we ask it every week. Who do you think will win the Stanley Cup this coming spring?
If I was a gambling man, and I am a gambling man, so I guess I'll have to give you an answer. I think Colorado looks pretty unstoppable. So I'll put my money on Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon, I think. And also, if they load up, if they make one trade, they maybe trade a draft pick or something. Unlike Elena's poor Maple Leafs, who have mortgaged the farm year after year, and now they have nothing to show for it. That's not the case with Colorado. They do have some assets that they could trade. So I could see if Colorado could do what Florida did, which is trade for a Brad Marchand, if they could go get, one stud player, they're already great, and the odds-on favorite now, I think. And if I could just bounce back to the Leafs for a second, I'd like to hear Elena's take on this. There's a lot of whether you should trade or not. And, my opinion on that is it doesn't even matter what. But I would just say, if you're going to trade your first-round picks, why on earth would you trade down with it? I see the Leafs and a lot of other teams trading their first-round picks for, good citizen third liners. And that is pure insanity. I mean, didn't the Leafs trade for, was it Foligno maybe 3 years ago? Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the first round pick for a veteran leadership guy, and it didn't really move the needle. He was injured, and they lost in the first round, and he didn't even stay with the team after that. And now we're kind of seeing it again. They bring in Brandon Carlo from Boston, who was a solid performer there, but now he's injured, so you don't really get the impact you were hoping for.
The beauty part with Colorado, Joe, is that one of our favorite people, Brock Nelson, is now playing for them. And he was just he was a very good Islander and a very, very nice guy. And, even though he's not with the team anymore, you like to see him do well. And he's doing pretty well with them. You gotta like that. Gotta like that. I don't like Colorado.
He reminds me of Gary Cooper.
He's a good one. That's a good one.
No, I'm still sticking with Vegas. So
Vegas is a good choice. It's a good choice.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to do it in the East, but It's too far away, too far away. I always feel that this now, starting in January, this is the real season. Things are sorted out, but now these games really matter more. And speaking of the Leafs, that's what Punch Imlach spent the first half of the season getting these guys ready, and then they got serious. Yeah, I'm reading an old book now called "The Leafs I Knew," written by a great Canadian writer named Scott Young, whose son Neil Young became famous in another field. And it's all about Imlach, all about how Imlach, but he couldn't get away with it these days because of the union and the players. But with the 6-team league, he won 4 cups, 3 in a row, and then a 4th cup in the year before expansion. And one of the guys who was the star on the last cup team was a rookie then, Peter Stemkowski. And we used to hear that half the guys on the team hated Imlach and the other half loved Imlach. And one of my buddies is friends with Peter. Peter lives on the island now, Long Island. And he asked Stemmer about that. Was it 50-50? And Stemkowski said, no, it was 99% hated Imlach. But he won a cup. So we're coming to the end. And Joe, it's a tradition for me to tell a bad joke, which I will. Okay, you ready? My friend Jack was talking to his friend Dave, and he said, Dave, my wife and I are always holding hands. And he says, well, why do you do that? And he says, because if I let go, she'll go shopping. Plain.
Reminds me, wasn't there a Bobby Hull joke similar like that? Was it Bobby Hull who said that someone stole my wife's credit card? And then his friend says, oh, did you report it to the police? He said, no, I didn't tell him. He's spending less than my wife does.
That was a Youngman gag. But Joe, it's great to see you, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Joe, this was a blast. Thank you so much for joining us. Big thanks as always to Stan and Jerry. And thank you to everyone listening and watching. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Bottle Rocket wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on socials. We'll catch you next time. Take care.